John, we're joined by one of our favorites this week and somebody who always informs and entertains, and that's David Cohn.
Love this guest, so thank you for getting him, Joel. Just terrific. Was an incredible pitcher. I will again make my pitch. That's my only pitch for him to be in the Hall of Fame, and just a great all-around guy to come on with us today when the Subway Series starts. So give him credit for that too, but really looking forward to this one.
Good pun, John. You're going to make a pitch to David Cohn. I love that.
That's
We'll
weak.
talk
It's
to
weak.
we'll talk to David all about the Yankees, Mets, modern pitching, the lack of hitting. John and I will talk about the Subway Series. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, it's kind of a great time to have the Subway Series. The NHL season ended yesterday. The NBA season's been over for about a week now. The NFL training camps haven't opened yet. Gonna have a lot of attention here in New York on these two teams at the right time. The Yankees still have the best record in the American League, and the Mets have the best record in June and have gotten back from 11 under 500 to honor Jon Heyman's prediction that they're going to be a playoff team this year. We're seeing a lot better stuff from them in almost every phase, especially offense. John, take the floor. You took the gamble to say they were a playoff team. Are they a playoff team?
Yeah, I mean, I did it on a day they lost 8-0 to the Marlins. They lost that series, and then they started playing even worse. But I mean, look, JD Martinez is great hitter. Alvarez being back, that's huge. Vientos gives them another power bat in that lineup. That offense is really good right now, and I think their rotational depth is better than most. So to me, they should make the playoffs. I think they will make the playoffs. Now, let's not give myself too much credit. They're not in yet, number one. Number two, when I made the original predictions back in for people who saved and clipped our special section, I didn't have them in the playoffs. So I'm not exactly Nostradamus, and we shall see how it turns out. So many teams are right around 500, close to 500. Some of them are starting to fall back. The Cubs don't look too good, but they still have six or seven teams they got to deal with. So not going to be easy, but to me, they are a playoff team and should make it.
Yeah, John, just to the finer point, I think there's actually three divisions in the National League. There's the obvious in, Dodgers, Phillies, Braves, and Brewers. There's the obvious out, the Marlins and Rockies. Get your participation trophies at the door. And then there's nine teams that are either in a playoff spot right now or within 3 games of it, regardless that several are several games under 500. John, I think you hit what I like about the Mets, which is their strength is now their offense. They're averaging 6 runs a game this month. That's the most in the major leagues. Putting Lindor at the top, getting the best version of JD Martinez, Vientos up, Alvarez off the IL. They've turned into a real wrecking crew of an offense, and they have pitching depth. And therefore, we kept talking about them being sellers. If you're a buyer, the thing you'd probably want to buy is relief pitching. It's usually what's in the most quantity in July, and either they'll be able to move a guy like McGill or Peterson into the bullpen and perhaps help there if they could get Senga back, Peter and Christian Scott back and build that kind of rotation. So I actually think they are, if this is their version, they're well positioned to buy. They built up their farm system a little with trades and not trading the last few years. Compared to teams like the Cubs and the Giants, I see a strength for the Mets, which is the offense. Most teams don't have a strength that are in this group, and I see a way for them to get better with the easiest thing to get in July.
Yeah, I mean, having that deep lineup, it's big. That's a Yankee issue right now that looks top heavy. But in terms of the Mets, the only guy really not hitting is McNeil, former batting champion. So he obviously has it in him somewhere. And if not, they'll use Iglesias, I guess, eventually. But in terms of their bullpen, I am with you. I mean, I saw on a national broadcast, somebody cited their pitching ERA, and the bullpen being the sixth best in the National League, as if that means anything. Obviously, the bullpen has had some big issues. They've blown more leads after the eighth inning than anybody. Diaz is having a horrendous season. I know he's had some moments, but he's blown a lot of games. Now he's going to be suspended for 10 more, and the bullpen is clearly the issue. One positive about that is it looks like there's going to be a number of good closers. And if I'm them and I want to contend and I want to be a threat, I go out and get one of these closers because, first of all, we don't know exactly what's going on with Diaz. And, even if he's good, I'd still like to see a great setup man. And, I mean, look at all these teams. I mean, Mason Miller, we're not sure if he's going to be traded from Oakland. I mean, Kopech has a good arm. Tanner Scott, lefty with the Marlins, having another big year. He's an outstanding reliever. I'm not going to put it past the Rays. I mean, they're willing to make trades. Would they trade Fairbanks? I could see that easily happening. There's just a lot of relievers. Estevez from the Angels, potentially. I mean, the Red Sox, we've been talking about Kenley Jansen. To me, the Red Sox have a plus 48 run differential. They're in playoff position, so I'm not seeing that as somebody who's going to be traded, but, maybe. But there's a ton of closers out there, and if the Mets are serious about trying to win this year, they should go get one and forget about selling.
John, I didn't do it. I often do a totally made-up trade in my online column, and you mentioned the guy I was going to do this week. I didn't do it. I'll give everybody it here. Would you do Tyler McGill for Peter Fairbanks? That's what I was thinking is a somewhat fair trade. The Braves are really good at turning a guy like McGill into something even better as a starter, and Fairbanks, to me, is what you said, perfect in he's either the closer or security blanket setup man for Diaz if Diaz doesn't come all the way back.
Right. He also has a great personality. I don't know if people around the country know that, but if you follow the Rays, and there are a couple of people who do follow the Rays, he's a funny guy. But he is a proven closer. He could be closing. He could be the setup guy. That would be a guy I think he may get traded. I mean, the Rays have a very negative run differential. It's kind of the opposite of the Red Sox, even though their records aren't that far apart. The Rays are under 500, and they're not a team that's going to push it. They certainly could trade and be a seller. We only have 5 really, I would say, surefire committed sellers at this point, but I'm going to say the Rays are a likely seller. So to me, that's a good one. But I mean, Tanner Scott's going to be very popular. It's going to cost a lot. And there's probably one of these teams that thinks it's going to win the World Series, whether it's the Phillies, the Orioles, Yankees, or Dodgers, that's going to go get Tanner Scott. So that's going to be a tough one. So yeah, somebody who's kind of under the radar, no pun intended. I think Pete Fairbanks would be a good one for the Mets.
John, I'm going to do the thing you often do here. Before I segue to the Yankees, for every scuzzy aggregator who's about to write, MLB insiders say Fairbanks to Mets. We were talking generally about the kind of trade that could be made. That's not going to stop you scuzzy aggregators. So go do your thing anyway. John, let's transition to the Yankees. They suddenly seem like they have needs, certainly in the bullpen as well. I'd be shocked if they don't add 2 relievers before it's all said and done. They can maybe get some internal help with Scott Efros comes back, or if they turn Clayton Beeter into a guy, but they're going to need some outside help there. And they kind of need a bat now. First base, second base, and third base has been a real hole for them in the length of the lineup. And to me, Luis Gil, for example, let's see if I can make this example, has done his job for the 2024 season. Would the Yankees like more? Yes. But his job was to bridge until Cole came back, and he couldn't have done that any better than he did. While guys like Stanton and Rizzo are out, can Gleyber Torres and DJ LeMahieu wake up and help the Yankees bridge this gap? Be like Luis Gil, because their lineup suddenly dies at about number 3 in the order.
Yeah, I mean, they are extremely top heavy. They were top heavy to begin with, even being third in the league in runs, right behind the Orioles and Dodgers. They looked pretty top heavy with the 2 MVP candidates. Judge, obviously, the MVP front runner right now, but sort of not that far behind. The rest of that lineup is somewhat questionable at this point. Stanton is a big loss. I know it's predictable pain, but it still hurts a lot. I know that Boone said that when they got J.D. Davis that he could platoon at first base, or suggested it was first base because he said platoon. So it's got to be with a lefty bat. So Rice, third base to me looks like they have 3 backups at third base, right? When Birdie comes back, solid backup. Cabrera, solid backup. And LeMahieu at this point, he has no extra base hits. His slugging percentage is 185. This is a 2-time batting champion. It's funny how are the batting champions, LeMahieu and McNeil, have really just not hit at all. But bullpen's the number 1 need, but this is a team that's going to go for it, a committed buyer, and they need to go out and get some offense too, I do believe. J.D. Davis is a good pickup. I mean, he's a 112 OPS plus guy who plays third and first, and he could DH now somewhat with Stanton out. So good pickup, but I'm not sure it solves their offensive needs.
Yeah, no, it's the kind of move you make until you could make a firm trade. I think Brian Cashman's history over his quarter of a century is when he has a really good team, he goes for it in the trade market. I expect they'll go for it. It is hard to find third baseman, for example, who might be available, who be difference makers. Is like, does Alex Bregman get in the market? Does Ryan McMahon get in the market? Like as bad as the Rockies are, I hear Ryan McMahon is the owner's favorite player, and he doesn't want to trade him. Like that's a crazy
I mean,
organization, right? Like
they don't do
obvious,
anything, right? The
right,
Rockies don't. They don't make trades. They're not trading a
right.
star. Bregman, look, the Astros are now in it suddenly,
Yes,
right? And
yeah.
a week ago, I heard that they were going to look for two starting pitchers. They were a buyer anyway. Now they're in it, right? I mean, I'm not sure. I personally think Toronto should be a trader.
They could trade him Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to play third base.
I'm not sure that's the answer, but
okay.
It's another great utility player. They already have three of those.
Yeah.
That's enough. But I mean, can Bo Bichette play third base? I don't know, but that would be a nice one. To me, Toronto should be a seller. So not a lot of sellers. The ones who are sellers probably don't have third basemen. I mean, Seattle may get rid of. I'm sorry, where Suarez?
Eugenio Suarez,
right, from Arizona, right? So they may trade him, but it's only because he's not doing well, right? So there aren't really going to be star third basemen out there. I mean, Bo Bichette is the only guy who pops to mind, and he hasn't really played third base, but I'm sure he could.
Yeah. So John, just as a way to kind of end this segment, the Yankees from 10,000 feet have the best record in the league. Do they feel a little 2022 to you? The 2022 team played great in the first half. They held on to win the division, but that's mainly because Judge carried them in the second half. And I had this argument with Brian Cashman where he said, well, we averaged the most runs in the league. And I was like, right, but it was artificial, carried by Judge. It wasn't like the lineup was good. Judge was good. And now it feels like Judge and Soto are good, and Volpe, but the lineup isn't good, and you're averaging five. It feels a little 2022 to me, where it's real lineup issues. And I keep going back to, if it's not LeMahieu and Torres, can Ben Rice and Austin Wells give them something? I think those guys have some ability to hit. Will they hit this year? I don't know, but they need more.
Right. Well, I mean, top-heavy teams can win the World Series, right? We saw the Nats win the World Series, and Soto was one of the two prime offensive players along with Rendon. So you got Soto, Rendon. I mean, they had a little bit maybe more depth than the Yankees, but not that much. And they won the World Series, right, with that top-heavy team. And this is much better top two, right? Judge versus Rendon. Rendon was very good when he was with the Nats. I'm not sure what happened when he went to California, but he was good with the Nats. But Judge is the best player in the game. So, it's possible to do it with two spectacular players, but not easy.
Yeah, well, MLB Insider says Yankees should acquire Howie Kendrick to play second base so they could be more like the 2019 Nationals.
I love Howie.
That's what scuzzy aggregators will do. Anyway, on the opposite end of that is one of our friends, David Cohn, the excellent broadcaster for Yes and ESPN, of course, and also one of the best pitchers of his generation. He'll be joining us next if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John and I are so pleased to have a repeat guest in David Cohn. Obviously, great career, great broadcasting career. And it felt, David, like the right moment to have you again because the Mets and Yankees are just about to renew acquaintances at an interesting time where the Mets are playing a lot better. They have the best record in June. And the Yankees are playing a little worse. Why don't we start with you're going to be there the next 2 days. John and I are going to be there. You see the Yankees more than anyone else. Any alarm at this moment with what you're seeing from the Yankees, or do you consider it a normal blip in a long season?
There's certainly always red flags throughout the season, right? And you'll especially leading up to the trade deadline, trying to zero in on what the needs are. Every team goes through this, and the Yankees certainly are right at the top of the list. And it's always about bullpen help, and certainly the Yankees are no different. When you look at the makeup of their bullpen, Clay Holmes was unbelievably outstanding for the better part of the first half. Ran into a little bit of a blip over the last few games, but nonetheless, still very effective, a very desirable reliever to have. But no doubt about it that their bullpen's kind of in flux with some injuries they've had, and everybody's looking for power arms, swing and miss guys. I mean, it's the name of the game. So the Yankees are no different. They need some swing and miss guys in their bullpen, probably at the top of the list right now.
Dave, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it. You're terrific. I gotta wonder about the lineup now. For once, it looks a little top heavy without Giancarlo. Obviously, they picked up J.D. Davis, which positionally makes a lot of sense. He plays first, he plays third, he could DH. Maybe he'll work out. Obviously, the bullpen seems to be their top priority. How active would you be if you're then pursuing another bat or potentially a third baseman, first baseman, or DH?
I'm sure they're out there looking without a doubt. To me, kind of some of it rests on Ben Rice, the rookie they just called up, and whether or not he's ready or not. And early returns are pretty good. I mean, they love this kid and his makeup. Smart kid, got some pop, left-handed bat, tough out, good plate awareness. So I want to see more from the kid. I know organizations and fan bases tend to fall in love with their prospects, and they want them to be promoted right away. And there's a big jump between AAA and the big leagues, maybe as big as there's ever been in the history of the game. Guys who rake in AAA come to the big leagues and get handed their hat, so to speak. So, but Ben Rice is a big part of this. Left-handed bat at Yankee Stadium. If he can play, that's a big deal for the Yankees in the middle of that lineup. I think a lot of these teams approach the deadline with kind of like the draft, in the NFL or any draft, the NBA or the NFL, where you hear the best athlete available kind of a thing. I think that really rings true. I mean, you can target whoever you want to target, but if it's not there, you have to take the best available piece that can enhance your roster. And I think that's the way a lot of teams look at it. I mean, the Yankees could go target a third baseman, but if he's not there, or other teams are involved, then you have to sort of reroute your desires and find the best available piece.
Yeah, you mentioned Ben Rice, available piece. I want to drill down on one specific player because Gleyber Torres is in his prime, and he's having a bad year. And you handled multiple runs into free agency well, where you were able to perform going into it. I wonder if you could frame that a little bit for us, because to me, watching him, it feels like he's carrying the burden of he so clearly loves being a Yankee and wanting to stay a Yankee, and he probably knows that's slipping away from him as he's going through this. Frame that walk year for a player who probably doesn't want to leave.
Well, it's a great point, and I completely agree, Joel. I mean, I really like Gleyber. I've gotten to know him over the 6 years. He's a great kid, very likable, loves being a Yankee. You framed that, spot on. He is definitely wearing it right now emotionally. It's a very close-knit team. I think that's a big part of it. When I went through those times myself as a player, you have to have some support around you that knows what you're going through, that can help you through some ups and downs. I think the Yankees have that support group. I certainly had it. With the Mets, I had guys like John Franco I could lean on and talk to and go out and have a beer with and just kind of let your hair down, so to speak. And, it just relax a little bit down the stretch run. But the bottom line is there is something different. You have to have that sort of inner conceit, so to speak, that overconfidence or a little bit of ego involved. And it really is. I mean, the great players all have big egos. So you have to have a certain amount of ego. I think the question is can you put it into perspective, and can you play with that without it becoming detrimental to your mindset? But for me, it was about a challenge. I love the challenge. Some guys really thrive with the challenge put on them, and other guys sort of, hey, wait a minute, this is getting a little heavy for me. And I think you could see that with Gleyber a little bit. It's a little bit heavy right now for him.
Well, you are my pitching expert, whether you know it or not. So I'm going to ask you about the sticky stuff. How has this evolved? I mean, I love Diaz, great guy. Unfortunately, I don't know. Have they said whether he's appealing yet, Joel? I'm not sure.
As of 10:20 a.m. on Tuesday, MLB had not heard anything.
Okay. In any case, his hand looked like it had been through a cement mixing stuff. So I don't think he's going to win this appeal. But tell me about the sticky stuff. Was it used in your day? Does it need to be used? Should they have a tackier ball? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we were kind of in the dark ages back in the '80s. I mean, if you remember the 1988 playoffs where Jay Howe of the Dodgers got thrown out of the game for having too much pine tar on his glove, and we kind of laughed about it. It was a cool night at Shea that night, and we thought, it doesn't really enhance anything. Yeah, maybe it helps you with your curveball a little bit, but we didn't know anything about spin rates and how you can increase your spin rate with the uber sticky substances. I was always worried, John, about blisters on my fingers. If something got too sticky, how do I control the baseball? What if it rips the skin off the pads of my fingers, and that's my livelihood? So, I was always worried about that sort of a thing. But obviously, these guys know a lot more nowadays. They've experimented a lot more, and they know what it can do to a ball, especially the four-seam fastball at the top of the zone. Just seems to zoom or stay up higher and ride that sort of seemingly rising fastball is enhanced by super sticky stuff. So certainly spin rates on breaking balls as well. We had no idea. I had no idea. So I'm a little bit in the dark. I've educated myself, and I know now, what it can do, but there's still some gray area there in terms of umpires and their discretion on sort of just touching a guy's hand and saying this is stickier than I felt before, and you're out of the game for 10 days. And a reliever getting suspended for 10 games is a lot different than a starting pitcher getting suspended for 10 games. It's two starts for a starting pitcher, maybe even one if you juggle the rotation. For a reliever like Diaz, 10 games is a big chunk of the season. They could have 5 or 6 save opportunities within that 10-game period. So that part I'm a little uncertain of. The punishment, does it fit the crime? Was his spin rates increased over the last few games that sent up a red flag that he was targeted or not? I mean, we have the technology to monitor this stuff. Has his spin rate really increased? Does he have a lot of success because, for some unknown reason, and maybe we need to target that guy, but I'm not sure the punishment fits the crime for relievers and starters. So to put all pitchers into one umbrella on punishment, I think I'm not convinced that that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, look, one other thing besides losing him for 10 games, you can't replace him on the roster. You play short a guy, and you're playing short a reliever in an age where you're in your bullpen every day. And so that's going to be a challenge for the Mets over the next 2 weeks, assuming he doesn't appeal and he doesn't succeed, which I would assume he won't on either situation. David, just to stick with this on your expertise on pitching, obviously MLB has tried a bunch of stuff to, pardon the phrase, juice some offense into the game, and it really hasn't worked to this degree. The batting average in the sport is the lowest in the modern era since 1968, which was the year of the pitcher, and they had to lower the mound after that. Any thoughts? You're a pitcher. You obviously don't want to get hit. But is there anything, if you were baseball czar and I said, you go for it, we want to try to get the batting average up to 260, some more movement around, what could be done? Can anything be done when we have so much technology to explain how pitchers could get hitters out?
Yeah, it's what's the political correspondent? What it was, James Carville? It had that famous line, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
For me, it's pretty simple. It's the strike zone, stupid. It's the strike zone. I mean, the strike zone that I pitched to was more of an east and west strike zone. We didn't get the high strike called. We got margin off the play called depending on the umpire and what good of control you had or what kind of a reputation you had. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, myself, we were veteran pitchers, so we got the benefit of the doubt on calls east and west. The higher strike zone has exacerbated the strikeout situation. The increase in velocity, the high curveballs and the high fastballs that you see called on the top line of the strike zone are pitches that we never even sniffed back in the 90s. If you threw a high curveball in 1992 that hit the top line, that was an ugly pitch. We didn't want to get that pitch called for a strike. Nowadays, it's routinely called for a strike. The velocity definitely has increased. The pitch design is better than I've ever seen. I've seen some of the nastiest pitches I've ever seen in today's game, especially from relievers. There's more better pitchers. There may not be more better starters. There may not be guys who go as long, who understand craftsmanship, who understand less is more sometimes, or the finesse part of pitching in order to get through the third or fourth time in the order. I get that. Starting pitching is a problem. That's a debate we can have on a whole nother show, probably. They could take up the entire show. But the simple answer is pitching is better than it's ever been. There's more better pitchers, especially short-term, high burst, high velocity, maximum effort guys. The breaking ball packages that you see now, the sweepers, the sliders, the slurves, are better designed than I've ever seen for swing and miss. I've seen some of the nastiest pitches I've ever seen, Joel, now in today's game, right here, right now. And the strike zone, to me, exacerbates the whole situation.
So would you would you shrink it? Would you say we're fine 17 inches, but we've got to come down to like the belt buckle or something? Is that a way to do this?
I would say yes. I would not call it as much of the high strike zone. I would redefine the strike zone in terms of maybe bring it down a little bit, but maybe sort of more of an oval shape, and let the pitchers with really good control who pepper the outside corner to get a little bit of benefit of the doubt out there, especially the guys with really good control, not the guys that are maximum effort, throwing it as hard as they can every time, but the guys who really do paint. Bring back the paint masters and reward the guys that hone their craft to be able to have really good control. I think those guys should be rewarded, yes, and rather than the guys who are just chucking it as hard as they can and not aiming anywhere and getting rewarded at the top of the strike zone with those kind of pitches.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I'll give first my 2 cents. I see too many umpires giving that pitch that's 6 inches outside a strike. It's like everybody's Tom Glavine. Some rookie can be Tom Glavine, all of a sudden get that pitch that's 6 inches outside. And I don't know if in your day, I thought there was a reputation that National League was a lower strike. I'm not sure if that's true. You can correct me if that's not true. But what did you think? And Pedro really came out against this Martinez. They were going to experiment with, moving the mound back by 1.5 feet, I believe it was. What did you think of that? We already have a lot of pitching injuries, so I think ultimately they've scuttled it or at least delayed it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can't really speak with any expertise to that because I haven't experienced it. I'm a little reluctant to jump in and say yay or nay definitively because I don't really know. I know the infrastructure of every amateur field in the country and the world would have to be remade and a lot of to great expense. So I'm not sure that's the answer. I'm not sure it would make that big of a difference either. I mean, we need to see more data to say, yeah, you move the mountain, you move the rubber back, 6 inches or a foot or whatever it is, and this happens. I'm not sure we really know for sure. And whatever experiments that have been done haven't really shown any really clear-cut data that it would help that much, at least from what I've read or seen. Now, with that being said, if you look at what's going on in the minor leagues with the strike zone, back to the strike zone, whether it's robo-umps, full robo-umps that have been experimented, or sort of a challenge hybrid system where a player's pitcher or hitter can challenge the system by tapping on their hat and challenging specific calls throughout the course of the game. I think that challenge system is what we're going to see in the major leagues pretty soon, if not next year, within the next couple of years. Now, if you want to increase offense, let me tell you that a full robo-ump system would help offense because there is almost a 2-to-1 margin in terms of pitches that are missed by umpires in the current game. There's more balls called strikes outside the box than vice versa. Umpires don't miss as many pitches inside the strike zone. If you throw the ball in the strike zone, for the most part, it's usually called a strike. There are some that are missed, but the vast majority of missed calls by umpires are pitches called strikes outside the strike zone. So if you do that kind of a math and you had a full robo-ump system, hitting would go way up at that point. So I know that's why the commissioner's office in Major League Baseball is kind of enticed by robot umpires or automated strike zones because that would definitely help hitting. There's no doubt about it. To your point earlier, John, all the pitches you see called strikes that are 6 inches off the plate. Well, you don't see strikes called balls that are 6 inches on the plate, right down the middle.
No.
How many times have you seen pitches down the middle called a ball? It happens. Sure, it happens, but not nearly as much, almost by a 2-to-1 ratio. It's the other way around.
David, I wonder if I could put your thinking cap back on for more pitching expertise, because you share something in common with the Yankee ace. You missed a big chunk of the 96 season, and you came back at a opportune time, which feels like where Garrett Cole's coming back. And I think you even had some similarity. I remember back then, there was a question, should you make another rehab start? And you said, I could fire the bullets down in the minor leagues, but I only have a certain amount of bullets. I'm better off. And it feels to me like Cole did his 3 minor league rehabs, and he was back when maybe we were expecting 4 or 5. What is it like to be the guy and come back with the season already in progress?
It's a great feeling to be wanted, right? Everybody wants to be wanted, no matter what you do in this world and whatever your job is. So yeah, it's good to be appreciated. It's good to feel wanted, and I certainly felt that in September. And I remember watching a game after my second rehab start in 1996, returning from my aneurysm. I think Jimmy Key was pitching in Seattle and got hit by a line drive off of his pitching hand that it ricocheted all the way to the outfield wall in Seattle. And I thought, oh, he's going down. I need to get back. We really need it. And I think there's a little bit of that with Garrett Cole. When you think about Baltimore was coming into town, big series, the upstart Orioles, there was a couple of injuries to the Yankees pitching staff. All of a sudden, there was a need for Cole to step right back in. So that's part of it as well. The current circumstances on the team matter. He could have taken another rehab start had their entire rotation been secured and healthy, and the Orioles weren't coming into town, but it just made sense. And I do agree with that. If you're feeling good and you're ready to go, then why not? Why waste bullets in the minor leagues? Why should you? The intensity isn't the same on the minor league level. Let's get to the big league level and find out right now, because that's the only time you really get that true adrenaline rush and you get a true gauge as to where you are.
You've really embraced analytics and particularly spin rate. If they had spin rate back when you were pitching, number one, would you have been even better than you were? And second, you may or may not know, I'm one of the, I think, 35 voters who voted you for the Hall of Fame. Shouldn't you be in the Hall of Fame? I just went and looked again. You have a 62 WAR. You have 5 World Series wins. You were great in the postseason. You would have had 6 if the Mets and Royals had made that dumb Ed Hearn trade a few months earlier. But 5 World Series is pretty good. Am I crazy? Shouldn't you be in the Hall?
The argument for guys like me to be in the Hall of Fame is a bigger hall. That we're underrepresented. I'm reluctant to argue on my behalf, saying, hey, wait, this guy's in and I was just as good as that guy. I don't like that game. But I do think that, when you look at the 80s and 90s pitchers who pitched predominantly, even from the mid 80s through the 90s, I think that particular group of pitchers is a little bit underrepresented when you compare it to other generations. And that's what the Hall of Fame's for, as you guys know. I mean, you're supposed to tell the story. We got to tell the history. Each generation needs to be represented. And, I can't compare to Mel Stottlemyre back in the 60s when he had 30 complete games in one year. I had 8, I think. I was among the league leaders. So certainly as you compare to your generation, how good were you and your generation compared to the average player? I think that bears weight. I think that should be considered, as opposed to, well, how good were you compared to Bob Gibson? Well, I can't compare to Bob Gibson. I mean, that was a different era. He pitched on a different mound, at least until they changed the mound because of him. So, yeah, I mean, a bigger hall maybe if you include a few more guys. There's other guys in my category that easily could be included in that, whether it's Brett Saberhagen, similar career, maybe Dave Steve, Kevin Brown for that matter. Those guys, I'm kind of in that category, I think. So, yeah, bigger hall. Yeah, maybe a few more of us should get in. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think what's maybe underappreciated often, and I think it gets worse with when analytics runs wild instead of being tempered to some degree, is like, what does winning mean? And you were such a key player on so many championship teams and were really good in the postseason. I think that should carry weight. I wonder if I could spin this forward, though, is you're talking about your generation compared to, say, Gibson and Stottlemyre. I'm looking at, once Verlander, Scherzer, Kershaw, Greinke come off the board, are we ever going to see a Hall of Fame starting pitcher again? And remember when we used to say 200 is the new 300 wins? Is 100 going to become the new 200? It's like Corbin Burns having a Hall of Fame career? I don't know. And I wonder what you think of your art as it gets, to some degree, less and less.
Yes, you have to adjust your sight lines. Absolutely. You have to take a lot of new factors into account, everything you just said. But to me, it still comes down to your generation, and compared to your generation, not compared to previous generations. What is your WAR ranking? What is your whatever new metric you want to throw in there compared to league average? How much better were you than the average pitcher in this era and during your time in the big leagues, during your 10, 15-year career? Where do you rank? Not in terms of 200 wins, but let's group a bunch of stats together. Let's get the best the best numbers together that you can gather and compare them to the average of your generation. And that's how you should be judged in my mind, or that's a better way to judge. So yeah, you're right. We have to adjust our sight lines. You can't penalize these guys because they would gladly go out there and pitch 7 innings if they were allowed to. They would. Corbin Burns, I've talked to a lot of guys, Garrett Cole, they would love to throw 125 pitches like I was allowed to do. But that's just not going to happen. It's not going to be allowed. When I got through 5 innings of a game and I had around 100 pitches, I was thinking 7. I still have 2 more innings left. Nowadays you get through 5 innings around 100 pitches and your day is done. And whether you like it or not, you are just not going to be allowed to go any further.
Yeah, I want to ask you what you consider yourself now. You were probably even better with the Mets. You had your 20-3 season with the Mets. You were obviously great with the Yankees. You won 4 championships with the Yankees. The other championship was with Toronto, I believe. So 4 championships with the Yankees. You're now a Yankee announcer. Are you just a Yankee, or I'm not going to ask hypothetically what cap you'd wear. I guess I could, but are you still partly a Met? Do you follow them, and what do you think of what's going on with them?
Absolutely. I was extremely proud to see Strawberry and Gooden go in the Mets Hall of Fame, or to go and have their numbers retired. I was very proud of that. I would have been there had I not been working for Sunday Night Baseball. I had to be had a job. My job got in the way, obviously. I fell in love with New York playing for the Mets. I had never been to New York City. I was a kid from Kansas City, Missouri, that had never been to New York when he was traded to the Mets, and I never left. I just fell in love with New York, and it was really because of the Mets. It's because of the influences of Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling and all those guys that were great influences on me. Mel Stottlemyre was my pitching coach on both sides of town. He was my pitching coach with the Mets for the 6 years I was there. And Davey Johnson was great with young pitchers back then. He showed a lot of confidence in us. So, yes, I'm proud of my Mets days. I always will be. There's always a soft spot for the Mets in my heart. And with that all being said, championships matter. They really matter. Going up the Canyon of Heroes 4 times with the Yankees, it was a life-changing experience for me, like I've never, ever experienced. Each one was better than the next, than the previous one. So championships are the trump card. They just are. We're paid to win. And 4 out of 5 years was just an incredible run with the Yankees, historically incredible run. And to me, that's always going to be the trump card when I'm asked that question. So, but I've always had a soft spot for the Mets and always will be.
David, as a way to wrap up, we did a little Mets there, but obviously this has mainly been Yankees and talking a lot about pitching. You did do the Mets on Sunday night. They are playing this big series against the Yankees. They're playing much better. It's a very broad question, but go where you want with it. What do you think of are we watching a playoff team with the 2024 Mets?
Absolutely, you could be. If these players just, the old saying is play to the back of your bubblegum card. That's what we used to say. And this is where old school and new school are kind of very similar. New school would say regression to the mean. The old school was play to the back of your bubblegum card. My mom, Joan Cohn, would say he's due. The first sabermetrician I ever met was my mom, Joan Cohn, who kept the scorebook and said, I'm over 20. Mom, I can't get a hit. You're due. Don't worry, hang in there. You're due. She understood the nature, the ebbs and flows of random variance. So with the Mets, when you look at their lineup, Pete Alonso is Pete Alonso. We know how great he can be. Looks like he's back to where he normally would be on the back of his bubblegum card. Francisco Lindor has been a sleeping giant for a while. I still think he's one of the great shortstops of his generation. He's capable of a lot more. He's shown that. Putting him in the leadoff hole was brilliant. It's probably where he should have been the whole time. Brandon Nimmo was the guy everybody sought when he's a free agent. Great guy, starting to play well. They've got some veteran pieces in that lineup that if they just do what they're supposed to do, or make them a very dangerous lineup. Vientos at third is very interesting. I saw him hit one 450 feet on Sunday night. Wow, what power this kid has, what talent. Francisco Alvarez the catcher, is one of the best young catchers in the game. Wow. He's huge. He's strong. He's a great defensive catcher. Yes, I believe in the Mets. Now, do they have enough pitching? Can they get their pitching sorted through? Can Diaz be Diaz at the back of the bullpen again when he gets back from his suspension? Can he be anywhere close to what he can be? Absolutely, the Mets are a team that could make the playoffs. No doubt in my mind they can. How far they go in the playoffs, a lot of that depends on the pitching. But that lineup is scary to me if they're all doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, it just brings more resonance and importance to the next couple of days. Yankees, Mets, the first of the Subway Series this year. David Cohn will be there. John and I will be there. And John and I can't thank you as enough, David, as always, for joining us on the show.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime.
We thank David Cohn, of course, for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
I'll take an easy one. Shohei Ohtani has been huge since Mookie Betts went out. He's in the leadoff spot. He's showing more power than anybody in the National League. Once again, what an incredible talent he is. I will again make my pitch that he needs to be more cooperative with the media. He's even shut down a couple of Japanese entities, one because they identified his wife as if his wife was going to be kept a secret for the rest of his life. That was not happening. So I will make my pitch for that. But as a ball player, fantastic. Right now, the second best in the game, probably, to judge.
Yeah, so I'm going to mix Ohtani into mine in a different way because my hit is going to be about a hit, which is Stephen Kwan. At a time where it's harder to get a base hit than almost any time in the history of the major leagues, Kwan was hitting 390. He's about 10 plate appearances or so short of qualifying for the batting title. The best batting average in the major leagues right now was 321 by Shohei Ohtani. We're talking about a guy who's hitting 390. Would you like to know what Stephen Kwan is hitting with 2 strikes? He's hitting 323, which is better than Ohtani's overall average. The major league average is 150-ish for 2 strikes. Stephen Kwan has been a magician. He has teamed with Naylor and Jose Ramirez, and Cleveland is one of the surprise teams in the sport at the top of that division. Suddenly they can really hit. And they might be, they just beat up on the Orioles a little bit after we watched the Orioles beat up on the Yankees. Pretty impressive. So I'm going to give the hit to the guy who's hitting at a time where there's not been a lot of hitting in the major leagues.
Yeah, we wish there was more hitting. I saw a great story. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It might have been on MLB.com. I'm not sure. It was somewhere who covers the Guardians. It was an interesting story about Stephen Kwan, who came from a family of intellectuals. Nobody expected him to be a great ball player. He was pretty terrible at Oregon State his first year, and I was a chess champion as a kid. And he said, there aren't many great ball players who go by Stephen. I don't know if that's true or not, but I haven't done an accounting of it. But it's a great story, and it's good for baseball, and we need more 300. How many 300 hitters? More than 68, but not a ton of even 300 hitters. And this guy's threatening 400 right now. So I give it a good pick. Good pick by you.
Yeah, it's a hit for a hit. John, you're the intellectual of this show. I always appreciate doing it with you. Thanks to our producers, Jake Brown and Tommy Hogan. Please, the New York Post Sports YouTube page. You can watch the show, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to it. Give us a 5-star rating, drop us a review, and please continue to stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.